South would form and ally themselves with enemies, foreign enemies. There's going to be wars. We just got done with the war fighting off the British. We can't do this. We don't have the energy and the money to fight another war. So that's why they pushed to have a United States, a united government. So they had to make compromises with the slaveholding states out of political necessity. They didn't like slavery, but they said, you know what? We have to make some compromises. That's politics, unfortunately. So let's first tackle one evil. So in the Constitution, have you heard of the Three-Fifths Compromise?
Yes.
A lot of the enemies of the Constitution will quote this part of the Constitution and say the Constitution is evil because of the Three-Fifths Compromise. They have misinterpreted what that means. The Three-Fifths Compromise does not mean that African Americans are slaves or three-fifths of a person. They knew that the debate over slavery was whether a slave was a human or a property. The founding fathers believed they were humans, right? Individuals in the southern states believed they were property, so it's chattel slavery. Just like you own a car, you can own another human being. So that was the belief of the southern states. So again, remember I told you the founding fathers said, the South will not buy in to this Constitution if we don't make compromises. And if they don't buy into this Constitution, I tremble for my country. Right? That was their thought process. So it's politics. They say, you know what? Fine. We have to make certain compromises. So one of the compromises was known as Three-Fifths Compromise. That is for representation. See, what happened was that, for example, in South Carolina, there were 4 million individuals, right? And there are 1 million slaves. You guys know how, obviously you know how the system works. It's based on apportionment, right? Let's say if you have 4 million people, South Carolina, a slaveholding state, can put 3 House members in Congress, right? But the founding fathers said, fine, you guys think slaves are property? You can't count them for votes. Does everyone see that, right? But then the South said, whoa, hold on, we have 1 million slaves. No, we need to count them. We're not going to sign on the Constitution if you don't count our slaves. Well, then the North, right, they say, well, that's not fair. You call them property. Then if you want to count them, free your slaves, make them human beings, full human beings, and then you can count them. The South said no. So they had to meet in the middle. Because now, for the South, so they use slavery for the old political powers. Everyone see that, right? So instead of having 3 representatives for 4 million people, they're going to include their 1 million slaves, and they're going to have 5 representatives. So now they have more seats in the House. So what happened was they said, fine, we'll count slaves as 3/5 for the purposes of apportionment. Does everyone see that? The founding fathers viewed slaves as humans, but it was a compromise with the South they had to make. And the enemies of the Constitution don't fully understand that. Then you also have the Fugitive Slave Clause. Again, this was another compromise you had to make with the South. The South maintained the institution of slavery. So what would happen if a slave would run away to a free state? The South said, we want protection. Otherwise, we're not going to sign up on the Constitution. So they had to make another compromise. They said, okay, fine. If your slave runs away to a free state, we will make sure we send your property back to you. So that's called the Fugitive Slave Clause of the Constitution. Okay? That was another compromise. And then you have allowance of the slave trade until 1808. So another compromise with the South. Fine. We'll allow the slave trade for another 20 years, and then we're going to have legislation to stop it. So does everyone see the role of the founders? They knew it was evil, and they wanted to take gradual measures to get rid of that evil. But they realized that due to political circumstances, we have to make compromises. Let's get rid of one evil, and then hopefully in the future, the other evil of slavery will go away. Yes?
So, I'm just learning about what's going on now in the world.
Sure.
Okay, so the United States is, a lot of our things come from these foreign countries, and so these foreign countries are actually, the individuals are in a slavery situation. And so our stuff is coming from those countries, from the slavery situation, into our stores.
slaves legally. So, yeah.
But the other, okay.
This is related specifically in the United States. Of course, there's human trafficking that happens under the table. Obviously, that's wrong. But this slavery back then was actually legalized by the government. The government allowed that to happen. Yeah. So again, Thomas Jefferson. Oh, Northwest Ordinance. One thing. This actually was written by Thomas Jefferson, and he wrote the Northwest Ordinance. And he said, in the Northwest Territories, because America was looking to expand in the Northwest Territories. In the Northwest Ordinance, he even said that slavery shall be prohibited. There shall be no slavery, shall not be allowed. So in the Northwest Territories, like Wisconsin, when Wisconsin formed themselves as a state, slavery is prohibited. So you could see the trend in the mindset of the founders of wanting to gradually get rid of slavery. Thomas Jefferson wrote this. He said that we have removed, in his notes on the state of Virginia, he has an essay called Manners. And in that speech, he says that, and can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis of conviction in the minds of people that these liberties are a gift of God? He says they are not to be violated but with his wrath. Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. That considering numbers, nature, natural means only a revolution of the wheel of fortune, an exchange of a situation is among possible events, that it may become probable by supernatural interference. So he was criticizing the institution of slavery. And in other words, to paraphrase that, he was just saying that supernatural interference may punish us for the sin of slavery. And here's the Northwest Ordinance. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the major clause. There shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the said territory. So this was the policy that was set in the Northwest Territories. Also, he wrote, religion, morality, and knowledge, being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the needs of education shall forever be encouraged. And he says, the utmost good faith shall always be observed toward the Indians. Their lands and property shall never be taken from them without their consent. And in their property rights and liberty they shall never be invaded or disturbed. So that was the Northwest Ordinance there. Then we go up to the Civil War time. We're skipping some history there, but we only have limited time. So obviously it was the goal of the founders that over time they wanted slavery to, they could have done more, but they had political circumstances they had to deal with. Over time, they wanted to see the gradual extinction of slavery. So you had two competing sides now. Even at that time, you had individuals in the southern states that disagreed with our founding fathers and disagreed with their principles. And then obviously you had people in the north. During this time, by the way, after the Declaration of Independence, there were 5 states that were free states in the north. Slavery was prohibited. Okay? The rest were concentrated, the slave states were concentrated in the south. And so John C. Calhoun was the vice president during John Quincy Adams' presidency and Andrew Jackson's presidency. And he was the major Southern intellectual who believed in the positive good argument of slavery. So he says this right here. If you read his speech on reception of abolition petitions, he believed, and this is the natural view of the southern states at the time, that slavery was a positive good. So this went counter. So he went against the founding fathers' philosophy that slavery was evil. And this is the link I'm trying to make. When we go against our sacred principles, we cease to be a nation. So this was the precipice. John C. Calhoun said that the relation now existing in the slaveholding states between the two, instead of being an evil, because the northern states believed slavery was an evil, our founding fathers believed slavery was evil, the Declaration says slavery is evil, right? It's actually a good, a positive good. So that's an excerpt that John C. Calhoun said. He believed that slavery was good for the slaves and for the masters. It was good for both races. It kind of reminds me, have you guys seen Gone with the Wind? Right? Gone with the Wind characterized this. It shows a romantic version of slavery. Did you see that? Right? The slaves are happy, and they're happy being a slave. So that was a southern romanticized interpretation of slavery. And that was John C. Calhoun's interpretation as well. So southern secession. They were leaving the Union in order to protect peculiar institution of slavery. And here's the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens. You can read his cornerstone speech. And in that speech, he makes it clear he's not for the Founding Fathers or against their principles. He says, our new government was founded on slavery. Its foundations are laid in its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the African is not equal to the white man, that slavery, submission to his superior white race, is his natural and normal condition. So that was the mainstream view of Southern intellectuals and leaders at that time. And he actually goes in it further, and I'll read a quick excerpt here. So he says, the prevailing ideas entertained by him and the most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the Constitution, so he's saying our founders, were that the enslavement of the African was in violations of laws of nature. Yeah, he's right. Our founding fathers believed that enslavement of the African was violation of laws of nature, because it says all men are what? Yeah. That it is wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. So Alexander Stephens is actually admitting that. Yeah, our founding fathers believe that slavery is wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. But here's his rebuttal. He says, those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. Our founding fathers' ideas were fundamentally wrong. That's what he claims. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of races. This was an error on their part. He says this, to continue. He says, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone, it's called the cornerstone speech, right? Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the African is not equal to the white man. That slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. So it is clear that the Southerners, or the Southern leaders, did not agree with our founding fathers, and that was building that Civil War hostility. You can see that going. Okay, so this was the divide, human being or property. So during this time, in the early 19th century of the United States, there was this big debate between slavery, human beings, or property. So at that time, we had the Missouri Compromise. It was a compromise between the slave-holding states of the South and the northern free states, right? Going back to our American government class, the Missouri Compromise was a balance of power in Congress between the slave states and the free states. The Missouri Compromise was passed in 1820, admitting Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state. The law prohibited slavery in the Louisiana Territory, right? 36-degree longitude, 30-degree latitude line, north. 36-degree longitude, 30-degree latitude. So that was the compromise. Will allow slave states below that, and above that, any territory that's admitted as a state shall be a free state.